I remember seeing the charge nurse, the crash team people, and then the doctors that in charge of the ward were all in there, and he was conducting the whole situation. I remember the conversation, but I could see his hands going up and down. And what was amazing was I was at total peace. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I wasn't worried. I didn't have any fear that anything bad was going to happen. But what I will tell you, which is a little strange, and it's maybe just the way I remember it, but I remember watching from a 45-degree angle, not watching straight ahead, but watching down.
Welcome in to Menfolk Journeys, the podcast of great conversations with men. I'm your host, Chris Foster, and we're going to explore how we wear this beautiful and confusing mantle of manhood in the 21st century. Look, I get it. In public life, a lot of men are knuckleheads. But in private life, we can be thoughtful and we can be reflective if we have the right conversation, if we feel comfortable talking about our story. And we all have a great story to tell. And we can all learn from those stories. We can learn about who we've been, who we are, and who we want to be. And that's why we're going to have this conversation, so we can learn from other men just like us. And that's why we're going to talk with my friend John. He has been given, or is born with, or developed a necessary gift of resiliency, and has really understood the art of moving forward, past injury and past trauma. He's one of the most loving men I've known, but it's his love for other people that actually has helped him get through moments and, in truthfulness, absolutely saved his life. We're going to listen to his story. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome in to Menfolk Journeys. John Yarrington, welcome in.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me here today. I got to tell you, when you asked me to talk on a podcast with you, I thought to myself, for Chris, I'll do anything. However, at the same time, I thought to myself, God, this is going to be incredibly challenging. Talking about yourself is difficult. But then I realized talking about yourself is a growth moment. It's an opportunity to learn about where you've been and where you're going.
That's right. That's exactly it. I think that the whole purpose of this podcast is to have these conversations so that other men can learn what other men are going through, because I believe if we can all help each other grow together, we can't help but give more to the community in a better way. So I'm really excited for you to tell your story. You have a beautiful story to share. And why don't we get started by having you tell us about yourself?
Absolutely. Let me steal the mic here for like a minute, and I'll kind of talk about who I am to the audience and say, who is this guy I'm listening to for the next hour? What's the story? What's he all about? At least we can have a little background here. I'm born and raised in Southern California. I live an active, outdoor, healthy lifestyle. I love exercising, playing sports, partaking in activities. I find peace and happiness in movement. In fact, a lot of times I go, I'm a shark. I'm always moving. I'm the fifth of 7 children, actually 9. 2 passed away after birth. I played 3 varsity sports in high school. I graduated from California State University, Fullerton, with a bachelor's degree in economics. I also went back to Cal State Fullerton and did my MBA with an emphasis in marketing. I'm not the tallest, the smartest, or the most athletic person in the room, but I realized something a long time ago. I have a unique ability to outwork, out-hustle, and outlast the competition. Whether playing sports or building a business, this mentality, this mindset, it's a concept that I live by, has always done me really well and always done me right. I'm a social creature. I love being the first to arrive and the last to leave. I enjoy traveling. I've been to 27 countries, 32 states, and 5 of the Hawaiian Islands. I believe there's a few more, so I'm going to have to find them. I live by 2 guidelines: be present and don't squander your time. I'm a boyfriend and partner. I'm a business owner. I'm a son. I'm a brother. I'm an uncle. I'm a friend. I'm an athlete. I'm a salesman. I'm an avid ice cream junkie. I'm a germaphobe, and I'm genuinely, authentically me.
Beautiful. I love it. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. That's what Newton said. And you're definitely a person that stays in motion. And, I think one of the things that you found, or that you said, that was interesting was you were a 3-sport athlete in high school. And I want to kind of touch on that because, what I know about you, John, physically is you're very strong and active. And you grew up being an athlete. May I ask, which three sports did you play?
I wish I could have played more than three sports. I loved playing sports, but in high school I played football, basketball, and I ran track and field. And in track and field I did the 400, which is the most grueling race there is. The 800 is arguably as grueling, but the 400, it's a dead ass sprint from start to finish for 400 consecutive meters, right? I also did the long jump and the triple jump.
Nice. So I thought you were going to do football, basketball, baseball, because that's kind of oftentimes how they do it. So I love it that you did track as that third one. So one thing that is funny about high school is there's a cliche of roles, right? There's the nerd, there's the brain, there's the jock. Now in high school, did you think you wore that label as the jock?
I was definitely a jock. I wasn't not trying to be a jock, but I was also just an all-around genuinely decent person. So I think I got along with the kids in the band. I got along with the kids in the science club. I got along with the kids that were the rockers and the punkers and the gangbangers. I just had a lot of friends when I was in high school. In fact, a lot of people tell me, "Oh my God, I'm so glad I'm out of high school." I was like, dude, I would go back to high school in a heartbeat. And knowing everything I know now, I do it even better.
Right. No, I can see that. What I know from you professionally and personally is how well you get along with other people. I think that comes from your genuine love of people, and we'll get to that a little bit later. See, I remember in high school, especially 15, 16, 17-ish, 18-ish years, it's this blossoming of strength and this sense of, this blend of hormones and physical growth, and you're getting stronger and better, and it's kind of this flush of feeling like I was on the cusp of manhood and the cusp of greatness, and you feel kind of invincible, right? You feel like you can do anything physically. There's also a very interesting comic book by Image Comics called Invincible. It's the story of a young man who comes into youth into his superpowers. His father happens to be the biggest, strongest superhero on the planet. But I think it's interesting that a young man would choose Invincible as his superhero name, because that's how you feel. When you look at JY back in high school, can you describe for me what the high school JY felt?
I loved going to class. I never missed school. I went every single day. People would say, I'm ditching. I'm like, dude, I'm going to class. I love to sit in the front row. I love to interact with the teachers. And I learned a couple of tricks. I wasn't a reader. I wasn't going to read the textbook. I wasn't going to do a ton of work, but I was going to engage and interact and talk and raise my hand and ask questions and be totally involved. And I knew that the tests were going to be based on what the teacher was teaching, not what was actually going to be out of the book. So I would get decent grades with minimal effort, but mostly using charisma and personality to work my way into positions that were better than I probably deserved.
Oh, that's beautiful. The everyone has different gifts, and I think that capitalizing on a gift like charisma and likability is not something I think to be ashamed of or frowned upon. It's a gift that you have, right? Everyone has different kinds of gifts: physical, mental, social gifts, right? The emotional intelligence is something that we're learning more about, and I think that's something you have in spades. And the fact that you acknowledge a sense of charisma that and the likability actually moves you forward in a certain way. And so one question then I would have is, you've got JY the Youth. I say JY because it's John Yarrington, and it's JY is a pretty cool nickname. So JY the Youth moves in to become JY the Young Adult. And out of high school, which you seemed like you thrived in that environment, and you move into college and you start moving into the young adult world, did you feel stronger and more capable than you did in high school? Like it was an extension of that young man?
It was a little bit of a different scenario. I went to a big high school. There was, 500 kids in the graduating class. And when I went to college, I went to a junior college. And so there's a little bit of a backstory here. My parents didn't really have a college plan for our kids in our family. There was 7 kids that survived, like I mentioned earlier, 2 that passed after, the 2 youngest died after birth. but my mom never worked. She was just a full-time mom, which is actually a bigger job than anyone can imagine, especially for 7 kids. And my
Especially for
dad,
7 kids in Southern California.
yeah, exactly. And my dad was always gone working, whether traveling for work, working late, working just to put food on the table and cover the bills. Now, neither one of them went to college. My dad is a smart man. He's much smarter than I am. He's borderline a genius, and he's a self-taught engineer. He went ahead and he worked for Xerox for 40 years. He
Wow.
started on the factory line turning wrenches, but because of his aptitude in mechanics and electronics, they kept promoting him. He took a lot of on-the-job training, some evening classes, and he became a manager of a plant and was in charge of a whole bunch of people. I can't turn a wrench without having to watch a YouTube video first.
What's
Right.
interesting though on that because clearly you're talking about this now 40 plus years later. That must have had some impression on you in terms of what you just mentioned in your preamble. You opened up saying that you're not the smartest guy around, but you will out hustle and outwork first in, last out. That must have been a lesson that you learned from the behavior of your dad.
If there's one thing I learned from my dad, is the value of hard work. We didn't have the same mindset. He's a musician. He played the clarinet, the saxophone, the drums, you name it, right? He played in multiple jazz bands and rock and roll bands as a young man, performed at a lot of places, still plays the piano better than most can at 84. And I can't clap to a beat, right? So we you go to the baseball game and the dun 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 dun, and I'm like missing my hands, right? I'm one beat behind at all times. So it's just the way it is. And we didn't connect on a lot of things because we just had different personalities, different interests, different hobbies. But he wanted to teach me electronics in the garage on a Saturday afternoon. And I said, no way, man, I'm playing baseball with the neighborhood kids. I'm shooting for,
Right.
my goal is to slam dunk a basketball and not to put together an electronic kit. So I'm going to be out there jumping, trying to touch the rim for the next 3 hours.
Right. Yeah, you know what though? I think though that the effort he put in on the factory floor to work his way through and to learn those engineering skills and the effort that you put into your sports and what I know to now be the effort you put into the work, there's a through line there that passed from father to son without a doubt, either through behavior or genetics.
No, I totally agree. So interestingly enough, to go back to the roundout of where we started from, there was no college plan. So when I graduated from high school, it was either go to junior college or get a job. And going out into the wild wonder of the world. So I went ahead and got a AA degree at a college called Saddleback College. And when I went into my freshman year, I had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew that I needed to go to school. And the difference was, this is a big place. There's a lot of people of different age groups. They're going from 7 in the morning till 10 at night. Nobody's there to hang out. No one really there to make friends. They're there because they're trying to get through a class, hustle off the work, do other things. And so it wasn't the same environment as the high school environment where you went there and you hung out all day and you had a bunch of buddies around you and you got to be big fish on campus. It was a little bit of a different scenario. But what I learned was, if you sat in the front row, you got to know the professors equally as well, and you got to figure out what you needed to accomplish with the least amount of effort for the best outcome. And so that's what I did. And I was very fortunate. I got mostly A's. In fact, I think I graduated like a 3.8 or 3.9 from junior college, and I was working full time and going to school. So it was a fun experience, but a different experience.
Yeah, and I think that also too, those commuter schools bring out the hustle in the students because you have to balance the schoolwork plus the work that you do. And it's funny because at that time, uh, did you feel like you had lost something in high school as you were moving into this new environment?
The biggest thing that I wish I would have done was gone out for a athletic sport. After, and we'll get into this later, but after having an knee injury, um, after just being worn out and playing a lot of sports, wanting to work and have money in my pocket, I felt like going to school and working was going to be the best route for me, not knowing that you're only young once and that you
Right.
only have one opportunity to do something like play a sport. Because
Yeah,
when you turn 30 or 40, it's much harder to go back and do that.
that's true. It is funny, John, because there's the Bruce Springsteen song Glory Days, right? And there's a trope, a lot of tropes about kind of the high school athlete who, they feel like they peaked early and they can't quite get past those early years. I don't think that that's you. I think you've moved on incredibly well and are still moving on. But, I don't know, John, why do you think that men, seemingly more so than women, seem to hang on to those youthful years, those youthful physical years, so much?
You mentioned a superhero about Invincible. And I'm gonna play off that for a second because that's what I was thinking about when you asked me a few questions about myself in terms of what we were going to talk about today. There was a point in life, and I think that point starts around 13, 14, 15 years old. You really do feel invincible. And there is a point in your life, and I know exactly when that point was in my life, when you lose that invincibility. And we can talk about it in a minute, I believe, but that invincibility, when it goes away, you want it to come back.
Yeah, you do, and so let's talk about that because being an athlete invites the risk of injury, right? You can't help it. And you did have a pivotal injury. Men folk cringe to hear about these kinds of injuries. And, I think all athletic men worry about a moment of incapacitation. And it's temporary typically, but it's a dreaded fear of what that transition means for you physically and what it means perhaps for the rest of your life and maybe what it means that you can't get back to again. Why don't you talk to us about that? Because that was a pretty key moment.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It all started back in 1993, believe it or not. 1993. That's a long time ago, Chris. We're sitting here in
Long time
2024.
ago.
And I was 17 years old. I was playing football at high school, and it was in the summer season. So we were doing like passing league is what they call it. And I was on a route to catch a ball, and I went up and caught the ball. When I came down, I got hit in the back. At the same time, I landed on my left leg, all kind of in the same time, and torqued my knee. My knee immediately swelled up like a watermelon,
Mm-hmm.
and I had torn half of my ACL, but not all of the ACL, just half of my ACL. I had gotten an MRI, and the doctor said, "Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to break it, and then we're going to reattach it, and in a year and a half, 2 years, you'll be good as new." And I said, "Hold on, wait a second. We're going to break it? So it's not all the way broken?" He's like, "No, it's half broken." I said, "So what does that mean?" He goes, "Well, it's going to eventually break." Okay, stop right there, doc. It's going to eventually break, right? He's like, "Yeah, but it's not all the way broken." Nope. All right, so here's what I'm going to recommend we do. Let's put a brace on it and I'll play.
I love it. JY, the 17-year-old saying, here's what I would recommend.
So I sat out for about 3 to 4 weeks, did some physical therapy, and because you're 17, the swelling goes away fast, the pain disappears quickly, the muscles grow back around it very fast, everything stabilizes. Because it was a partial tear, I played the whole season. I went on to play an entire basketball season on it. I went on to do an entire track season on it. And just imagine triple jumping on that knee, right?
Wow.
And then, it healed, it hardened up. It takes a while it's a non-vascular area, the knee. And so ligaments in the knees don't heal fast. It's a long-term injury. But it healed up. When I got into college, I wasn't playing sports in terms of like a group, but I started running races. So I started doing 5 and 10Ks. I started heavily getting into mountain biking, going down to the beach and riding waves. So I was putting a lot of miles on the thing, playing basketball with my buddies on the weekend. And it did me well all the way until when I was 29. When I was 29, I was playing in a men's basketball league, and I tore that other half.
Oh, no.
Oh yeah, and I knew it. I kind of knew it, but fortunately, it wasn't nearly as bad as the first time. I just knew it was I was, done for it in some way. So I got myself a really great orthopedic surgeon. He did some work on me, and 9 months of rehab. Working out hard. I was able to hit the gym mostly every day, do all my rehab. And if you're ever injured, I highly recommend do the rehab. You're only going to be as strong as the work you put into the injury after the fact. If you don't do the rehab, you will be weaker and lesser after the fact. But if you do the rehab, you can get back to where you were. So this first time around, I was refusing to believe that I was injured or that I was not invincible, right?
Right.
And every day from the time I was 13 or 14, when you start to go through puberty, until I was 29, and I mean this when I say this, every day I got stronger, I got faster, I could jump higher, I could run longer. You know, it sounds silly, but you can go to the weight room and just put up another 10 pounds every time you went into the weight room. Like, hey, I just benched 10 more pounds. I just benched 20 more pounds. And then, you know, on the court, you're like, hey, I'm dunking a basketball. I'm only 6 feet tall. I shouldn't be dunking a basketball, but, you know, you could, right? And you never got tired. You could mountain bike for 3 hours, go to the beach, ride some waves, and then meet some buddies for a game, pick a ball, and be like, all right, let's go to dinner, and not be worn out. It's such a great experience, right? Because you have unlimited, unbounded energy. But I worked out with all the doctor's rules and regulations, with my physical therapist, and at the 9-month mark, and they knew my goal was to get back to where I was. So my goal was to get back into the men's league and be playing basketball again. And so on the 9-month mark, I went to my doctor and I said, how's it look, doc? How's it look? He's like, it's strong. It's good. You're good to go. The physical therapist, how do I look, doc? He's like, you've recovered very well. I'm very happy for you. And again, it takes a long time for ACLs to recover. It's non-vascular. There's not a lot of blood flow. You can't race Mother Nature. It just has to happen at the speed that your body's willing to recover, no matter how much work you put into it. The work supports you, but the time is what you have to wait on. So I got back in this league. I'm playing ball, feeling great. And on the 1-year anniversary, the week of the 1-year anniversary, I retore that knee.
No, you didn't.
And this is the moment I knew I was no longer in my prime. I was 30 years old, and I was no longer invincible.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that there's a moment where the peak is gone, and not just you weren't invincible anymore moving forward, but you'll never have that moment again that you did, right? And it's one of those things where as you get older, you never, you know, a buddy of mine was telling me about this, and he was playing hockey, and he says, you never know when your last game is at the moment, right? You don't know that that is the last game. It just is the last game. So when that happened, John, after the shock and the, you know, I'm sure there's some grieving process, right? The shock, the disbelief, the denial, and all of that stuff. Did you immediately try to find another peak? Did you channel that energy into something else?
You know, I did. The first thing that happened was I wasn't grimacing in pain of physical pain when it happened the second time. I was grimacing in mental anguish because I knew I had probably 9 to 12 months of going to rehab, taking it slow, not doing what I wanted to do, not going where I wanted to go, not being the person I wanted to be. That was heartbreak, right? And then I just kind of said, well, this is where I'm at, and I know what I've got to do. I've been through this before. Put the head down. Let's grind this out 3 to 4 days a week for physical therapy. As many days as insurance will allow me to go, as many days as I'm going to go. When I'm not there, I'll do it on my own, right? And as I got better, it was like, well, I also like riding bikes, road bikes, mountain bikes. I also like going and riding waves. So I may not be playing lateral sports that involve a lot of intense jumping and explosions, but I'm just going to play sports that are more linear. And so that's what I started to do.
You know, and I think physically that if you're, especially in the formative years, if you're used to really intense, vigorous physical activity, your body gets used to it. But I think more importantly, your brain gets used to it. So full disclosure, I was a swimmer in high school, Division III in college. I swim in the ocean now. And my brain needs whatever physical stuff I get from really intense physical activity, and it gets used to it. And if I don't do it, I feel like I go into withdrawal, right?
Yeah.
I think that, you know, for you, you know, just channeling that, you had to still do something physically, and you had to still do something that created that vitality, that virility, that, you felt like you had for so many years.
You're absolutely right. So there's endorphins that are created when you play sports or participate in athletics or work out, and those endorphins make you feel good. Uh, I'm not, like I mentioned when I first started, I told you a little about who I am. I said in one of the lines, I'm happiest when I'm moving. I find peace in movement. And I think of myself as a shark. I don't like on the couch on a Saturday afternoon. I'd rather be doing something, whether that's gardening, washing the car, doing laundry, vacuuming. I got to be doing something. And when I'm doing something, I find comfort.
We'll be right back. All right, so John, you had just mentioned that the physical therapy was so important for your recovery, and that you had to do the work, and that if you do the work, you come out stronger. Sounds a lot of like a life lesson. Do the work and you come out stronger. Strange how that goes. And I think, though, that when you do that kind of work in that environment, even if it's not directly related, there's a thing that happens in your mind, and that maybe it happens in your soul, if we can talk about that, where you learn how to be, stronger, and you kind of receive this necessary gift of resilience because, you might have had an injury back then, but you had another injury that was coming up.
This is true. I did have something coming down the pipeline. I think in my life, there's a lot of chapters. I think of my life as a book. And let's say every year is a chapter. And then maybe my book, if I'm lucky, will have 100 chapters. Well,
right.
in every chapter, there's an injury. and for me, the next big kind of moment in my life that shaped who I am today and helped me recognize the wonderful life that I have and the great places I still have to go is what I call the crash to save my life. In fact, it's a 4-part story, and I'm going to share it with you, so bear with me, and I'll kind of break it down real quickly. The first part of this thing is the actual crash. The second part is the incidental discovery. The third part is kind of the moment, right? And then the fourth part is the life lessons that I learned from going through this experience. So let me paint the picture. I'm on an all-boys trip mountain biking in Santa Cruz, California. It was November 14th, 2024. We're having a great first day, which was a Thursday. We're out there tearing up the trails, riding terrain we've never seen before, doing things that are bigger than our capabilities, and being able to do it because you're a first timer, so you don't know what's coming. You hit that jump, hit those rocks, you just have to go for it because you didn't know it was going to be there. It was unexpected. Whereas the home courses, you know what's coming up, and you kind of avoid the things you can't do, and you tackle the things you can. But when you're doing it on a away course, you don't know what's coming, so you just have to white knuckle it and go through it and have a lot of fun afterwards and laugh about it. Holy smokes, I can't believe we just did that. So we were having one of those outings on a Thursday. Went out for a couple of beers and dinner, crashed out, got up in the morning on Friday, hoping to duplicate that same experience. And for the first 2/3 of the day we were, until riding down a hill on a totally like easy kind of situation, I caught my bottom of my pedal on my right leg on a root. And I was going fast enough that it threw me over the handlebars. And when I went over the handlebars, I kind of tucked and rolled. But when I tucked and rolled, I landed on my left funny. And I felt a kind of popping sensation. And because I had a lot of adrenaline going, I didn't have any pain at first. But when I went to stand up, I pushed off my arm and nothing happened. And I was like, oh, God, something's wrong. Something's wrong. Did I break my arm? So I kind of grabbed my wrist, grabbed my hand, grabbed my forearm. Yeah, everything's fine. Then I stood up, started to dust myself off, and I'm like, my left arm doesn't work. My left arm doesn't work. And so I called for a couple of friends that were ahead of me, and they kind of pedaled back. And my acromioclavicle joint, which is the AC joint, which has 3 ligaments that attach the collarbone right here to the back of the shoulder blade, had all snapped, all 3 of them.
Oh my
And
God.
my collarbone was pressing against the skin so tight that it was pushing out my back.
Oh
Now
my God.
everyone's like, oh, I'm so lucky you didn't break your collarbone. I said, dude, I wish my collarbone would have broke. If my collarbone would have broke, they would put a couple of pins on it. 6 weeks later, I would have been back on the bike. But my bone was strong and didn't break. The bone actually snapped the ligaments, which never come back. They're gone for life.
Oh,
So
gone
that
for
earned
life.
me gone for life, gone for life. So my not as bad as it sounds. The story does get better, but
That
that,
sounds pretty
that
bad.
that earned me a trip to the ER, and we were riding in what they call elite trails. Everybody rides there, but no one's coming to get you, so you have to hike out. So I had to carry my bike out for about an hour out of these trails with my arm hanging off the side. We made a makeshift splint out of a inner tube so that the arm was in a comfortable position. Drove to the ER. I remember sitting on a bed at the ER, and all these people, nurses, administrative people, doctors, kept walking in and out of the room and staring at me. My shirt was off, and I was sitting on there. Finally, this male nurse, comes up and goes, "Buddy, I'm going to put the towel around you just because you're a bit of a circus right now. Everybody wants to see the guy with the bone out of his back."
Oh my God. Oh my God.
So the ER doc comes in and he says, "Listen," and I didn't really understand everything he was saying at the time, but for the most part, it made sense, which was, we need to do surgery right now. We're going to take a screw and we're going to screw it through your collarbone and into your shoulder blade. You're going to lose range of motion, but we're going to put the sucker back together. Now, hold on here a second. This sounds like a hack job, and I'm visualizing a Home Depot screwdriver, power
Right.
screwdriver, driving a wood screw into my, collarbone. And I was like, no. Let me call my orthopedic surgeon. I happen to have one. He's done a few knee surgeries for me, and I know he does shoulders as well. So I called over there, and I said, "Doc, this is what's happened. It's Friday afternoon. I'm in Santa Cruz. There's no way I can get back down to Newport Beach. What do we do?" And he says, "John, whatever you do, and if you were my own son, I was going to give him the same advice. And I make a living out of cutting people. Do not let that man touch you. Do not do the surgery. Do not let the man touch you. Come see me. I'll clear the scales. I'll clear the schedule for you on Monday. Come see me. We'll put together a plan."
Oh my gosh, that's a very bold statement.
Yeah, it was bold, but best thing that ever could happen. And I'll explain later as we get deeper into this conversation. So I went home, and it was a long drive home with the shoulder kind of not in a good place. Went in on Monday, saw this doctor.
That must have been a terrible. That must have been just a terrible weekend, John, of pain with that shoulder all weekend long, just hobbling around. I don't know how you even slept.
Oh, it was bad. It wasn't good. But pain is only a mindset, so you push through it. And I got back. I saw the doctor on Monday, and he says, "Look, here's the deal. You got a grade 4 separation, which means all the ligaments are torn. That bone's not in a great place. We're going to get you into physical therapy. Give it a year, and you're going to be back to your old self. And if you're not, after a year, we can consider surgery. But give it a year." He's like, "I got a lot of hockey players and football players that have injuries like this, and they're back out playing professional sports. I think you're going to get to be where you want to be, and we'll work together to do it." So, and that's what I followed. I went back into the physical therapy, 3 days a week, physical therapy. Again, working out the shoulder. And when I couldn't lift anything, I couldn't lift a yo-yo.
Oh my gosh.
my arm just didn't work. It was in bad shape, right? So about 3 weeks have passed, and people are saying to me in my inner circle, "Hey man, maybe it's time you give up mountain biking, right? Maybe it's time you pick up some like easier sports. Have you ever thought about trying golf?" I'm like, "Well, golf's a game, and I get it, but it's not really what I want to play." So I sat down and I thought about it for a weekend, and I came up with this ingenious plan. Well, my thought process is that this isn't my first crash, and it's certainly not going to be my second or third crash or my last crash. There's going to be more crashes to come. I just know it. So I'm going to do something ingenious. I'm going to do my therapy, get better, continue the ride. Only I'm going to protect myself with a little bubble by increasing my insurance. I'm going to get long-term and short-term disability insurance. I'm going to get life insurance. I'm going to be rocking stocked with insurance. So if anything happens in the future, I'm good. So in that process, this is where the stage of incidental discovery kicked in. To get, really good extended insurance, you have to go and do blood work. So
Right.
I found an insurance company I wanted to work with. The insurance company came to my office. They draw blood. I'm thinking to myself, I'm 38 years old. I'm in great shape. I exercise daily. I eat really well. I'm training for the 70.3 Ironman series. So I'm in really tip-top shape. And this would be a no-brainer. They take some blood. I get my insurance. I'm going to get it at the lowest rate possible because I'm in perfect condition. I have no existing conditions, the whole thing. About 4 days later, I get a phone call from the insurance company. Everything looks really good. In fact, your numbers are spectacular, except for this one area. There's some enzymes that were just a little off. We're just going to recommend that you retest, and then we'll get this taken care of, get you all dialed in for your insurance, and you're off and running. Okay. We'll just send another guy to the office. They draw blood. No problem. 3-4 days later, I get a phone call. Just want to let you know that the results are just as equally bad as the first time on those enzymes. We can't insure you, but we're going to recommend that you go see a doctor. And I'm like, what kind of doctor do I need?
Oh my gosh. What kind of insurance company recommends you to go see a doctor? That's bad. That's backwards.
If you're looking, I can recommend one. So it was like, okay, time to go see a hepatologist, right? I'm going to go find myself a hepatologist. And that enters me into Hoag Hospital in Newport Beach. And I walked in and I gave them my blood work, and the doctor I was working with said, okay, we're going to do some tests, which meant more blood work. So this was the third time I'd done blood work in 3 weeks. And then it was like, the blood work came back and they showed that my ALTs and ASTs, which are your 2 liver enzymes, were like 10 to 12 times the normal range. So to give it a mathematical equation to think about that, if a healthy person was somewhere between 30 and 50, I was somewhere between 300 and 500. And actually at one point I was more like 600.
No. That doesn't sound good.
No, it wasn't good. So they knew that there was an issue there, but the problem was I wasn't presenting any symptoms. I didn't have jaundice. I wasn't tired. I didn't have pain. I didn't have lack of energy. I didn't have a lack of appetite. Nothing. I wasn't losing weight. And so they scratched their head and they said, well, let's do a whole bunch more blood work. Let's do urine tests. Let's take an ultrasound. Let's do a CT scan. Let's do an MRI. Let's do tumors, the whole thing. Let's do with and without contrast. So you have to do all these things twice. These conducted these surveys. I walked around one full day at work with a 1-gallon jug that I had to pee in and keep in the refrigerator.
Nice. You're like, don't mind me, folks.
Sorry, folks, I have to keep this refrigerated. And then, the outcome was basically you're an incredibly super healthy person with high liver enzymes. Translation, we have no clue what's going on with you. So I said, so what do we recommend here? Well, we recommend that you take a steroid called prednisone. So like a week, 2 weeks? I'm thinking this, pop a few pills and everything's good indefinitely. And
for the rest of your life?
Yeah, right. So I started doing a little research on what prednisone was all about, and it's a bad drug. People, the side effects of prednisone are diabetes, hypertension, osteoporosis, depression, glaucoma, moon facing where your face rounds out, buffalo hump where you get a big dorsal fin on the back of your neck, and balding. And I'm way too vain for any of those things to happen.
Right.
So I was like, look, prednisone is not for me. So is there a plan B? And they said, no, there's no plan B. I said, okay, well then I need a second opinion. Do you have a recommendation on who I can talk to? And they said, well, we work closely with the University of San Francisco, and we can telehealth you over to them and see what they have to say. They're pretty good at this. So I moved on to my second hospital, and a barrage more of testing, the same testing all over again, lots of the same questions, but also they got more personal, more deep into the questions. It was like, tell us your sexual history, tell us your drug use history, tell us this, tell that, and you're talking to these people that you don't know and telling them your intimate stories, and it's intrusive, but of course I didn't have anything terrible to share, so I wasn't worried about the stuff, but it's just mentally you're going through a lot. Meanwhile, while all this is happening, I'm still doing physical therapy for the shoulder.
Sure.
So I'm in a doctor's office every day, in the morning before work, at lunchtime, after work. This is my life, right? And their outcome at San Francisco was like, well, you're super healthy. Your enzyme levels are really high. We don't really have any clue on what's going on, but we do recommend that you take prednisone. And that would at least will get rid of the inflammation and so on and so forth. And I was like, okay, I'm now determined I'm not taking prednisone. So
Sure.
my options are take prednisone or let's go get a third opinion. So I went and looking, I went online and started looking for a great place to go. And I came across UCLA and they had a great liver department. And so I said, okay, let me go to UCLA. And I met up with a couple of great doctors. They ran all the same tests. And even though like I had done all these tests, everybody wants to start from scratch. So they ask all the same questions, do all the same tests. Then at UCLA, they said, we're going to biopsy your liver. Okay, what does that mean? Well, we're actually going to drill a hole in it like an apple core and take a core out and look at it.
Wow.
It's like, okay, well, how long is that going to take? Oh, just one day. Fine, do it. Just do it. It's like when you have a car and it's at the shop and the mechanic tells you also need brakes. You're like, just do it.
Yes,
it's there.
Just do it. Exactly. Take the core of my liver, please.
I was just going to have an oil change, but do the brakes too. Fine. So then they were convinced because I was in pretty good shape at the time, better shape than I am now just because I was younger. They were pretty convinced that I may have been doing a lot of anabolic steroids, which I have never touched a steroid in my life.
Sure.
So every time I saw them, they're like, "Go, tell us about your steroid history." Well, my history is going to be the same as the last time we met, Doc.
Right.
I can make something up for you. Zero. I can make something up for you if you want, but I don't have any colorful stories to tell here. So they put the full court press on doing prednisone, and I was getting pretty exhausted of the story, going, I'm not doing any more prednisone. I'm tired of this situation. This disease, the medicine will kill me before the disease kills me, right?
Right.
So I said, well, at this point, why stop? Let's go get a fourth opinion. And I started asking around to friends and, hey, does anyone know of a good place I should go? And I was looking online. And a guy I know, a buddy of mine, he said to me, I know a place that you can go. It's down in La Jolla. And I'm a donor to the hospital and I know some people on the board. I can probably get you in pretty quickly. I was like, I'll try it. Why not? It's not that far away. It's an hour and a half with traffic, an hour without traffic to get down to La Jolla. I'm in, count me in. And thankfully he got me in and I got in within a week of making the first call. And the doctor I see, and just to give you an idea, the doctor I see him once a year still. And when I called a few weeks ago, my wait time was 10 weeks to get in to see this guy.
Wow.
So that's how busy he is. And I got in 1 week, which is amazing. And this is where my aha moment starts in this story. And so I walk in, and one of the best things that I had done during this entire process is I carried this 3-inch red folder with me everywhere I went. So starting from the first day, I asked every doctor to give me a copy of my reports, my medical history, the lab results, everything that happened. I just shoved it in my folder. That folder gave me control. Folder gave me the opportunity to build a path, design questions I wanted to ask, and figure out where I'm going during this kind of chaotic time in my life. And so
that's great. That's so interesting that a lot of people feel out of control with doctors and with tests and with procedures. And that was a very smart way for you to grab it and feel like this was not their journey. This was still your journey.
I love that you say that. I didn't know it at the time that what I was doing was the best thing I've ever could have done, but it just made me feel good. And so that's what I did. It's like, I'm going to be the person that manages my situation. I'm not going to get managed. I'm going to be the manager. And that's what I decided to do. I walk into the doctor's office. First time I see him, I'm holding my big red folder. It's full. I mean, this thing is 3 inches stuffed with like all kinds of stuff, right? And he says to me, what's in your hand? I said, this is my folder from all my appointments and all the medical results that I have. He goes, let me see it. Pass it over. And he's an older guy. He's probably 65, 67, something like that. And he starts going through it page by page. And he's like, And every time I wanted to interject and share what I had done and what I had collected and where I had been, he'd go,
chip. He's like, you're just chip.
That's exactly what happened, right? Then he sets the folder down and he glanced through everything and he sets the folder down and he says, sit down in my bed here. He's like, pull up your shirt. I'm going to put you on this machine. It's kind of like an ultrasound. I said, oh, I've been on these before. And he puts the oil on the lube on your chest, on your stomach, and runs this magic wand over your side, and everything comes up on the screen. And he says, "You see that? That's your liver, and it's not in good shape. In fact, it's failing, and it's not going to fail today, but in a few months, you're going to wake up, you're going to go to the bathroom, your urine is going to look like Coca-Cola, and you're going to freak out. And when you freak out, you're going to run to the hospital, and there's going to be nothing we can do because you waited too long."
Oh my gosh.
And he goes, "But don't worry." And I won't name the doctor's names for the sake of privacy, but he went Dr. X, Dr. Y, Dr. Z. I know all these boys. In fact, I trained all these boys, and they should know better. I know exactly what's going on here. I know exactly what's wrong with you, and I can fix it. And I said, well, oh my God. Because first he just told me I was going to die in a few months, right?
You know, it's interesting what you just said, though, is that he called them boys, right? And I think that is something where, you know, men do that when they think of someone who has either less experience or less maturity. And I'm sure he was looking at those doctors and he would never call them a boy to their face. But in that moment, it's funny when you say it this way, but we do, right? Men do. He was the man. They were boys. He was wise and mature. They were young and inexperienced. They didn't see something they should have saw. He now, like the Mr. Miyagi, looks as the master and says, they're boys and I trained them and they should have done better. Right? Isn't that funny that we get into that language?
Yeah.
But so continue, please. So he saved your life.
So he saved my life, and he said to me, "What you're suffering from is an autoimmune disorder." And for anyone out there that doesn't know what an autoimmune disorder is, it's when your body's immune system attacks the healthy cells and organs within your own body. It's genetic. It can't be caught. You can't share it. You can't transfer it or pass it to somebody. And it's generally activated by a trigger at some point in your life, right? And the trigger can be anything from sunlight to an allergy to adolescence. And for everybody, it's different for different autoimmune. But basically, my white blood cells were waging war on my liver on an everyday basis. And eventually those white blood cells are going to win. They're going to beat the liver up. But the good news is that the liver is the only regenerating body organ that you have. And so a human can live 100 years. My doctor was saying to me that a liver can go 250 or 300 years. If you have 1/3 of your liver, it can regenerate to the full size. That's why you can give a liver transplant, and your slice that you give away would just grow back. And if you were to be a donor and got killed in a car accident, and they harvested your liver, they could stick it inside a 13-year-old boy. That boy could grow to be 100 years old, and then he could donate your liver to the next person. That's how long your liver can last.
Wow.
So it's an amazing organ. And if you had to have a problem with an organ, that's the organ to have it with, because it's the punching bag of the stomach, right? It takes in all the toxins and filters the blood and the urine, and then, you know, puts you in a place where you're a healthier person because of that. So in my case, the reason why nobody identified all of the hospital systems I went through was I was a nearly 40-year-old man at this point. This was a 15-month journey, right? And the autoimmune disorder I was suffering from generally affected, and I mean, I say generally, 90+% of the people who have this issue are adolescent teenage girls. So, so I have a teenage girl disease.
Wow. What's interesting is that I love it that you use the phrase, the punching bag of the body, right? In some ways, the liver is the most resilient of organs.
It is. It is the most resilient organ.
You know, and some of the story that you are talking about is about resilience. It's your resilience of fighting back and overcoming and standing up against what is physical ailment and injury, and at one point, life-threatening event.
So, that's interesting. I've never thought about it that way, Chris, but you are right. Resilience meets resilience. I should get a tattoo.
Well, how appropriate too. How appropriate for you, John, that the organ that was, causing you problems was the one organ that could be the most resilient, and I think that, that might be one of those themes of your life where resilience is something that you have as a gift, right? The necessary gift of resilience, if you will. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful story.
I've never thought about it that way. I like the way you put it. I'm going to frame it and put that in my pocket so the next time something comes up, I'll think about what you just shared. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So I'll wrap up this story. With the life lessons learned. Basically, for me, I'd take a low dose immunosuppressant and a low dose steroid. 90 days later, I was testing normal enzymes. 10 years later, I'm testing normal. So that's a really exciting time. What I learned from this whole experience, though, was that you need advocates in your life, right? And in my case, I'll name a couple of advocates that work for me. One was my orthopedic surgeon, stopping me from getting the surgery. Could you imagine if I would have gotten the surgery and had this bad liver and the anesthesiologist put me under? I may have never woken up. I may have died on the table because of that. So not only did the orthopedic surgeon point me in the direction that got me into the incidental discovery situation, but he saved my life from not dying on the table. Or my friend who pushed me to go to Scripps and got me in with the 1 week. If I would have made the appointment at Scripps and waited 10 weeks, my liver may have failed.
Right.
Those advocates helped save my life, right? The other thing I would say is that my red folder made me my own advocate. You've got to be your own advocate in life, and in everything you do, whether it's going for a job interview, looking for a date, whatever it might be. You got to be your own advocate. You got to be your own best friend. I learned not to settle. Good isn't always good enough, and settling is not always the right answer. And then finally, I would say you got to be proactive, not reactive. I was reactive in this situation because I wasn't going for daily checkups. I felt healthy. I wasn't being proactive and saying, let's get my yearly annual checkup and make sure everything's good. I was going, I'm good. I'm great. I feel fantastic. I'm in great shape. I eat well. There's nothing wrong with me. But there was a silent killer lurking around, and that put me in reactive mode for a long time.
Right. And what's interesting too, John, is you said earlier that in high school you got through more easily with charm and affability. You're naturally easy with folks, and you create friends very quickly. I think that your relationship with your orthopedic surgeon was one beyond just doctor-patient. He liked you personally and took your call on a Friday afternoon to say, whoa, 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 don't go under the knife. And the connector to the donor at Scripps that got you into the appointment early was also because of a personal relationship. Yeah. And the strength of your cultivated relationships is also a through line and a theme in your life. And I think it also helps save your life.
I'm going to agree with everything you said. I've never thought about it in those ways. If this whole direct marketing thing doesn't work out for you, I think there's a whole career for you in psychology, Chris.
Full disclosure, I'm not a therapist, but what's interesting about what you talk about, John, is these themes of resiliency and these themes of making authentic connections reveal themselves in different ways throughout those stories.
Yeah, that is very true. Very true.
We'll be right back. So that theme of resiliency, I think, pervades through your adult life. And you had mentioned to me, and I think it's worth sharing, that you had a really tumultuous number of years. And, what's interesting, I think, about living, and when we look back at our high school years, the ages between 12 and 17 are momentous, right? There's so much change in those 5 years. Everything changes about your body and yourself, your perspective, and you grow like crazy in those times. And then your growth physically starts to slow down a little bit. And, between 30 and 35, you don't change that much, right? But you're someone I've known, and in those years, 5+ years, you had a dramatic change throughout. And you said earlier that if the book of your life is going to be 100+ chapters, every chapter there's an injury. You have you had some serious things happen in 5 years that were injury related, right? Not physical injury, but a lot of emotional injury and a lot of things that you had to had to reveal that resilience once again.
Yeah, it's funny because, injury doesn't always have to be physical. It can be emotional. It can be social. There's a lot of ways that you can find injury, right? And for me, I don't think of it as I have hurdles that I've had to jump or get through. I think of it, this is just my life. And I imagine everybody's life is the same way. In fact, I couldn't imagine being constant or steady for 10 years. I think my life would be so different. Maybe, I don't want to use this word, maybe boring, right? Right? Always having to push over the next horizon, get over the next hurdle, fight my way through something. That's how I get up in the morning. That's how I go to bed at night. And that's just, it's my life. It's just normal to me.
Yeah. So why don't we talk about that? Right. In 2018 was one of those pivotal moments where, professionally there was a dramatic change, and again, you had to be resilient. And again, John, you had to tap into a network of cultivated relationships that you had built.
Yeah, this is a great story, and it's one that I'm better for as of today. So in 1999, I went to go work for a company called Advanced Art Communications, and it was their largest trade publishing and expo house in the country. They had offices in Santa Ana, California, where I work, but they were in LA, New York, Boston, Chicago, Duluth, Eugene, London, Hong Kong, you name it, right? They're all over the world. And I originally took a job, and for another day, I'll go into all the details of how I got the job, and another day I'll tell you how I got into the industry that I'm in today. But I started at the front desk there out of college, and within 7, 8 months, when I was working at the front desk, I went to go work for a magazine called Response. And Response at the time was a dots and spots, yell and sell, all along the linear line infomercial magazine that I knew nothing about. But I was going to grad school in marketing, and I had an economics degree, and I liked to be in sales. I took a sales job there. No training, no mentor, just here's a book and start dialing and calling, right?
Out
Praying and
hustle.
praying.
Out hustle, baby. Out hustle. First in, last out.
First, I was always in early, and I always stayed late. And when I stayed late, I always had to interact with the C-suite employees because they'd come by and they'd hear me on the phone, leaving voicemails. And I always found out if I left voicemails late at night, people would get back to me in the morning. And so they come in the morning, check their voicemails. It's like 6:30, John Yarrington leaving a voicemail. Want to buy an ad? I better call him back. Or sometimes I would actually get the owners of the companies because they were still at their offices. And then they would be actually impressed to talk with me because I was a young guy calling them at 6:30 or 7 at night. And,
Right.
they were answering their office line, not knowing why. I mean, you couldn't get them because the gatekeepers in the daytime. It was impossible. But they would answer at night because the gatekeepers had gone home. Anyway, that's a story for another day. But my partner Tom Hare, who I'm still working with today, he came on board about a year after I did, and him and I spent a lifetime at this company. And during this time period, the company was bought and sold, changed names, changed hats, changed venture capitalist owners. And along the way, they'd always say to me, "Here's what we want from your group: 10% more money, 10% less cost. You figure it out. It doesn't matter if you're selling ice cream cones, rubber tires, taking people to sell timeshares. It didn't matter what we were doing, really. No, they didn't understand our industry. They didn't understand our model. They didn't understand what we did for a living for the most part, but we always made budget. In fact, we always exceeded budget. So we had a good expense account. We could travel anywhere. At some point, Tom and I were going to bar mitzvahs, weddings, funerals, birthday parties. Oh, you're going to be in Chicago? We'll be there.
Sure.
But we made all kinds of great relationships doing that. Lifelong relationships with people by being there at their important moments. And in 2018, I got the call from the CEO of the organization, and the company was selling again, but he wasn't able to explain that to me at the time. And in this company, our group wasn't going to go with the new sale. And so what I found out was that he couldn't fully explain the details without violating the terms of the deal. So he basically said, "Hey, I'm calling with not such good news." "Okay, what's going on?" And I'm thinking like, I got a project that I'm not going to want to do or something like that. He said, "Friday's your last day."
Oh my God.
This is a Monday, right? I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, it's just there's no way I can go into details right now, but we're terminating our relationship." So first thing I'm thinking is I've been at the company now for 19 years. I've spent
Oh
a
my
lifetime
God.
here.
Your whole life.
Whole life. How many millions of dollars do I have to make the organization to get a bone thrown my way, right? Is what I'm thinking. So first thought was, no problem. They got all kinds of visions and all kinds of groups. They're going to rehire my team. We're all going to go into different groups and have instant jobs waiting for us. But no, there wasn't even many jobs waiting for us. The relationship was being severed. So they said, "I want you to tell your team tomorrow. I want you to prep a letter on Wednesday, explain to your customers that we're shutting down the property. And on Friday, I want you, after I've approved it and the county and the legal has approved it, I want you to send that letter on Friday thanking everybody for working with you guys for the last 19 years. If we owe them money, the letter should explain how they can get paid. If they owe us money, the letter should explain how they can pay us. There's a little bit of severance waiting for you guys, and thanks for the 19 years." It was like,
oh my God.
Here's a hat and a piece of cake. You're out the door, right?
Oh my gosh. That is a nightmare. That is the nightmare business scenario for anyone who's put in decades of service.
It really is. There was no golden watch. There was no parachute. There was no thank you. There was no goodbye party. What I learned was organizations have a different belief structure than you do about the job that you do. They believe that they pay you a salary for you to come in 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. in the afternoon and to do the job. And the relationship they have with you is you work, they pay. Now, it doesn't work because we're human, right? So corporations are different than human beings. On the human side of this whole deal, you fall in love with your industry. You fall in love with your coworkers. You fall in love with your company. You are a part of a team and you're participating. You're working hard and you're trying to make things better. And then all of a sudden this relationship ends and you're emotionally hurt and the company doesn't care. They had a fiduciary responsibility to make a payroll to you and that was it while you were working. And you're like, but we're buddies, we're friends, we're family, right? Nope.
It's interesting. I was talking with a man who's a CEO and he started his own business and he talks about his team as family, as community, as tribe. And it's an interesting thing because I think there's a natural inclination to, like you said, fall in love with the business and fall in love with your customers. It's what I tell all young professionals when they're moving into the working world. And that there's a yearning, I think, most humans have to believe in a tribe that they're a part of and to identify with the tribe that they're a part of. But I thought you said something really interesting, is that a corporation, which really actually isn't a human entity, a corporation is a piece of paper. It's an abstract idea. If anyone has read the book Sapiens, it's really interesting. He talks about these contracts and he says corporations are just an idea. It's a figment, right? It's not actually real. It's just real because we believe it's real. And it doesn't care about you.
Nope. You love it, but it does not love you. And that's just the way it is. And I learned that lesson the hard way in 2018. But so on Tuesday, I sat down with Tom, my friend, my buddy, my compadre, my business partner, and I said, dude, here's what's going on. We're all terminated on Friday. So we went and sulked about it, had lunch, complained, talked bad, said, we should have done this years ago for ourselves. All those things, right? And on Wednesday we got together and I said, are you done with this industry? Are you done with this community? Are you done with this line of work? And he said, absolutely not. I said, neither am I. And then we both mutually agreed, why don't we start our own thing? And so on Wednesday night, we crafted a letter to our personal contacts from our LinkedIn accounts and our phones. And at the same time, we crafted a corporate message that was going to go out to our clients and audience that we served. And from our personal emails on Thursday evening, the next day, we sent out a letter to everyone we knew and said, hey, tomorrow morning you're going to receive really unfortunate news from the organization. Can't go into details right now, but just know that everything's going to be okay. And I ask that you trust in us because you're going to get this unfortunate note on Friday, but you're going to get a really cool note on Monday the following week. And all we ask is that you take a little trust and reserve the right to wait for about 48 hours, and everything will make good sense come Monday next week. And that was the timeline. We now had until Monday the next week to build a business. So we went to work over that Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, and we built a business called PDMI, which is the Performance Driven Marketing Institute. It's a 501c6 not-for-profit trade association dedicated to protecting, promoting, and advancing the direct-to-consumer and performance-driven marketing industry.
You got it. You built it. And what I love about that moment, John, is, again, it's those through lines of resiliency in the personal network because, full disclosure, in my professional environment, I'm a member of PDMI, and I have known John since that time. And I knew John from Response. And then I got that letter. I got that very odd, confusing letter. And then I got the letter on Friday, and then I got the letter on Monday revealing the new PDMI. And then I got you on the phone and you explained everything that happened. And so what I've noticed and what I've seen is that the organization that you build comes from that love that you have. You fall in love with your members, you fall in love with the organization, and you fall in love with the purpose of the organization. And that to me is one of the things that is the reason for its success.
Thank you for saying that. And I was tingling all over when you explained to me that you got those 3 letters. So that was 2018, and I learned how to love a company again. This time it was my company, and I got to love the people in a different way because I got to cherish the work they do and the work we're going to continue to do. That rolled into 2019. Things are going well. I'm feeling great. I'm happy where I am. I got my own company. We're building it with our own 2 hands and our own resources. And in August, it was like August 1st or 2nd, I was going to meet my girlfriend, Chris. And so she was coming over to the house. And so beforehand, I went down to the high school in the town that I live in, and I swam a mile in the pool. Then I went to the track and I ran 3 miles around the track. Then she came over. We had lunch, went to the beach, spent the whole day playing in the water, having a good time. And at dinner that night, I said, I felt a little gassy pop in my stomach. I mentioned earlier I have a liver condition that I thought maybe that's something. I mean, I always think about it because it was in that kind of area where the liver is, right? And so I went to bed, no big deal, but I woke up at about 5 a.m, just not feeling normal, not feeling right at all. Something was wrong, but I didn't know what was wrong. I wasn't like sick, but I wasn't feeling normal. So I moved to the couch and started watching TV. And every hour that went by, I was feeling more awkward. And so around 10 a.m, I said, I'm going to go down to the urgent care. It's Sunday. So it's not like I can call a doctor. I'm not going to go to the ER. I'm not like ER sick. So I'm going to go to the urgent care and just get looked at and explain to them what's going on. So I see this nurse at the ER, and I explained to my situation, and she looks at me and she completely belittles me. She goes, You probably have the flu. Everyone's coming into town with the flu right now. And unfortunately, I currently have the flu, but I'm a single mom and I have to work. I was like, so are you calling me a wimp right now? Because I'm at the urgent care because I might have the flu. So she goes, just sit here and the doctor will come see you. So then about 20 minutes later, this doctor comes in and tells me he's an ER doc. He's like 60 years old. He's very personable. He's got all kinds of miles under his feet. So I feel really good with him examining me. I'm on the table. He's touching around. He's asking questions. And then finally he says, what did you have for dinner last night? I said, Mexican food. He goes, did you eat the hot sauce? I was like, yeah, I had hot sauce with salsa with chips. And he's like, did you have any chili? I said, I did have a chili. He's like, that's okay. He's like, yeah. He's like, how old are you again? And I was like, I'm in my 40s. And he's like, oh, okay. Sit up on the end of the bed for a second. And he sits down, leans up against this table, folds his arms, so Joe cool looking, right? And he turns into like a dad moment. He says, son, let me explain something to you. There comes a point in everybody's life when they can't eat like an 18-year-old anymore. You got
Oh
what I call
no.
indigestion.
Oh no.
I'm going to give you some, I don't know what it was, Zantac or whatever it was he prescribed. It wasn't that brand, but it was something they had on hand. I paid like $18 for it. He goes, go home, eat some soup, have some bread, drink a bunch of water, take these pills. 6 hours from now, you're going to feel like a brand new man. So I did.
Mm.
I followed his orders. 6 hours later, dude, I felt like a dog. I was feeling terrible, right? I mean, just the worst. And I looked at Kristen and I said, I hate to admit it, but I think that nurse who belittled me at the urgent care was right. I've got the flu. And she goes, well, do you want anything? I said, how about some Tylenol flu? I think I just need to sleep this off. So she goes to the store, gets me Tylenol flu. I pop a double dose of Tylenol flu, and I'm thinking, if I just sleep this off in the morning, I'll be fine.
Sure.
So she was gonna drive back to LA where she lives in Santa Monica, and I was living in Laguna Beach. And she goes, you know what? I'm just gonna stay here tonight. I want to look after you because you don't look right. I've never seen you like this before. So I go to sleep, and Tylenol wipes you. You take a double dose of Tylenol, you're gonna fall asleep, right?
Right.
Tylenol PM. I wake up in the world's
Ugh.
worst pain, grimacing, shaking, throwing up green bile. And I'm like, we
Oh.
got to go to the hospital. Got to go to the hospital now. I can't even stand up straight. Meanwhile, typical guy mistake, not call 911. Where are my keys? I got to drive to the hospital.
Of course you do. Of course you do. That's hilarious.
Right. So she's like, look, the hospital is only 3 miles away. It's just a straight shot down PCH. So it shouldn't be that bad, right? She's at least I'm driving. So I'm literally throwing up in a bucket on my feet. And it's the like lime green. It's just terrible, right?
Ugh.
Pulling to the ER. I sit down. They immediately admit me in. Thankfully, it's a slower hospital. And they throw me on some. They said, "Dude, you're in terrible pain, aren't you?" I said, "They put me on some Dilaudid, which is awesome painkillers. If you ever get the chance at the hospital, take Dilaudid, do so."
It's a little La La Land.
Yeah,
Dilaudid called
it's like
La La Land.
just I went from just doubled over to like just kick back and chill, right? Telling stories, making jokes. Um, but they threw me on a CT scan and they said we got to operate immediately.
Oh.
So it turned out what was happening was my appendix they thought was going to rupture. Only when they got inside of me, they found out that it had already ruptured.
Oh my
And
God.
everything that I was experiencing was sepsis poisoning and had been going on for about 24 hours. I never had any pain or discomfort or symptoms from the appendix. Normally with the appendix, it starts off the size of your pinky, and as it starts to get bigger, it can go to the size of a banana. That puts all kinds of pressure on your internal organs, letting you know, hey, you should go see a doctor, right? Well, for me, I
Wow.
had no pressure, no pain, no inconveniences. I was running, jumping, swimming, surfing, the whole deal the day before this all happened. And anyone who's going to have a ruptured appendix, that shouldn't happen to. So anyway, the surgeon had to, if you can visualize this as a dentist, when they do water on your teeth and then suction when
Mm-hmm.
you're at the dentist, they had to do that with my internal organs. They had to wash all the organs off to
Oh
get
my
the
gosh. They
sepsis
had to
out.
rinse all the organs off because
They had
you
to
had
rinse all the
sepsis
organs
in your
off.
organs. Goodness gracious.
And then they'd rinse them with sterile water, and then they had to vacuum them out over and over and over again. So the surgery was much longer than it was supposed to be. And then I came through, and I was like, the first day, I was like, I'm good. I feel great. And I said, what do I got to do to get out of here? And they said, well, you have to take a lap around town, around the hospital. I said, all right, where are my shoes? I'm going for my first lap. so,
Naturally.
so I go for a lap. I'm telling them I'm great. I feel good. I'm telling jokes. I'm meeting new people. I'm high-fiving the people. What can you bring me for food? Everything felt good, right? The next day, they said, we're going to move you. We're just going to move your room. It's going to be a better room, a nicer view. But what
Mm.
I realized is they moved me into the room next to the ICU
Oh,
row,
wow.
which is strategic that they did that and to my benefit. So, because on day 2, at the end of the day, Chris was visiting, we were hanging out together, and I said, I am so cold. I am so freaking cold. And I'm shivering, and I'm never cold, right?
Right.
So she looked at the monitor, and my blood pressure was on the floor, and my heart rate was really low. So she ran and got the nurse. The nurse came in and immediately called for a crash team. And the
Good
crash team
God.
came rushing into the room, and I remember seeing the charge nurse, the crash team people, and then the doctors that's in charge of the ward were all in there, and he was conducting the whole situation. I don't remember the conversation, but I could see his hands going up and down. And what was amazing was I was at total peace. I wasn't I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I wasn't worried. I didn't have any fear that anything bad was going to happen. But what I will tell you, which is a little strange, and it's maybe just the way I remember it, but I remember watching from a 45-degree angle,
Watching yourself?
watching them from a 45-degree angle,
Oh,
not watching straight ahead, but watching down.
wow. It's so interesting, John, because the world is replete with stories like that, where you have an out of body experience of some kind, where you're looking at the scene as a third person looking at the scene. Um, that's remarkable that you still
Yeah,
remember it that way.
and I wasn't scared, wasn't nervous, wasn't upset, wasn't frightened, nothing like that at all. So I got to watch that, and then everything went back to normal, right? And the next day, that lead doctor came into the room and he was checking up on me and he said, "Hey, buddy, you're going to be just fine. But I want to tell you something. You gave us one hell of a scare yesterday. Good to have you back."
Nice. It's a thing. When he says "good to have you back," it's you might have been gone for that moment and saw yourself from a distant, and they might not have seen it or called it that way. Um, and I think what's so amazing about that story, John, is that in those 3 years of 2018 dramatic loss of professional relationship, 2019 a hair's breadth away from leaving this place, 2020 COVID hitting and completely disrupting all normalcy in your life professionally and in some ways personally. There's this um, thing that happens to people when they are receiving the blow and moving forward. And of course, the Rocky Balboa speech is the best one ever about that. But it's almost like you have this innate ability to move forward with positivity throughout the experiences. And Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, said, what doesn't kill you make you stronger. I guess I'll ask you, do you get stronger after each one of these moments?
You do. I think you need a few scars, a few bumps, a few bruises, a few cuts that makes you more resilient, right? You're like, I've been to this movie. I've seen this before. It's just another day in my life. I'll turn the page and start over tomorrow.
Right. It's a funny thing and in some ways, that's the only choice. I mean, the sun comes up, but so much of it is your mindset too, right? If you have a give first mentality and a love first mentality in a way that I'm not saying everyone wants these challenges, but to work through the challenges and knowing that whatever challenge you're going through can't be that way forever. And there's something beyond it. I think over time that you have learned that you become a better, stronger person for the challenges that you accept and have to work through.
I think you're probably right, and I would agree to all that. But for me, I don't think of it in those terms. I think of it as just, this is my normal life. These are the normal things that happen to everybody. And you either push forward or you fall behind. There's something I learned a long time ago, and it was that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. And for me, it's what you do after something happens that makes a difference on where you go.
We'll be right back. So, John, you just mentioned that life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you react to it. It's interesting when you say the word react. I think that there's a difference between reacting and responding. So, hear me out. I think reacting was what happens in the moment. Reactions are fast twitch. Reactions are a moment that happens to you and you have an instant reaction. Responding to me is a little bit more ingrained. Responding to me is a little bit more long lasting. How you respond to something becomes a little bit more habitual than reacting. And responding to me has more of a staying power, where you are building in habits of your life and how you respond to situations rather than react to a moment. And so I'm curious, when you say, I think that you've actually responded to all of these things because you've changed your perspective of yourself and how you deal with certain situations. And in fact, Johnny, you did change your perspective on the crash cart. Your perspective was at a 45-degree angle looking down. Your perspective completely changed on you. So I think that, going through what happened in 2014, 2018, 2019, I think in life you started to respond to injury and respond to situations differently. What do you think?
That's a pretty deep thought there, Chris, and I appreciate you throwing it my way. Make me work a little bit here. Look, when I think about reacting, I think about walking down the street and somebody slaps you across the face and you're not looking for it. You didn't know it was going to happen. You have a couple of choices. You could fall down and cry. You could yell at them, but it's all going to be knee-jerk, right? It's going to be like, I can't believe that just happened. And out of the moment of emotion, out of fear, out of fight or flight, you'll have a reaction. And I think it's normal and I think it's common for people to have reactions on a quick basis when something happens to them, whether it's at work, in their love life, with friends, physical injury, whatever it may be. But once you get through that immediate 2-second reaction, I think that can be instinct. Your trained behavior should kick in, which is your responding. And your responding is built in layers and layers and layers of exposure that you've had to other experiences. And if you're somewhat of a clever human being, you may actually take a moment, a little bit of a deep breath and say, all right, I've seen this movie before. I've been to this theater. I know exactly what to do right now. And I'm going to start systematically responding in ways that are going to make me better, not worse, for this situation that I'm in.
That's exactly it. And that's why, for me, I look at you as responding to situations. And, it's an interesting thing because through the injuries that you had, you equipped yourself with these tools of responding. You equipped yourselves with this, not just the gift of resilience, but the tools of how you get through and move forward in certain situations. And I also think you leveraged your beautiful, deep network of friends and relations, which helped you get through those situations. It was only your deep personal friendship with your orthopedic surgeon, where he would pick up the phone on a Friday afternoon and say, Johnny, buddy, don't let that guy cut you. Don't. But if you hadn't developed a personal relationship with him and been so genuinely connected to him as person and not just as patient, he wouldn't have responded the way he did. And when, you have this buildup of network and goodwill, you wouldn't have had the call from the guy who was on the board of scripts, right? It's your personal relationships that in the end of the day, I think, helped save your life. And so I think all of that helped prepare you for the year of real challenge in 2020. So why don't you tell us about what happened and how you used all those tools and those skills and those experiences to help you get through?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. So 2020 was a year that started off fantastically, right? I was thinking we're going to be another roaring 20s. Everything's going to be wonderful business-wise, personal-wise. Things are off to a great start. No one had any idea of this thing called coronavirus or COVID or anything in those terms. And the idea of a worldwide pandemic shutting down the world from a business perspective and a personal perspective was the last thing anyone thought. That was a Hollywood movie, right? That's all that was. And my partner Tom and I, we had made a lot of personal investments to run a business that really was focused around live events. It was trade conferences. Now, we had a 1C6 not-for-profit trade association. Great. We have a magazine. We have a newsletter. Fantastic. And all those things are operating and functioning and generating revenue. But most of those things are lead-ups to or supporting factors around the idea that you get this group of people, of buyers and sellers, in one room for a period of time where they can mix and mingle, network, and make money together. And that only happens, that magic happens when you sprinkle all those elements into a pot, stir it around, and it comes out in a live format where everyone's actually handshaking, high-five, and hugging. And that's our business model. Well, in March of 2020, the world came to a grinding halt. I call it Armageddon. I remember the day Armageddon happened in California, and they said, folks, everything is closed. And it's like, wait, closed as in closed, or just closed as in not today? It was indefinite. And I remember picking up the phone and calling the hotel we were working with in South Beach, which is Florida. And I said, guys, I'm going to have to cancel this trade show. And I know the trade show is in 30 days, but nobody's going to be able to actually attend the conference. And their response to me was, it was like that moment from Different Strokes. It was what you talking about, Willis? It was like, yeah, I mean, it's like Armageddon out there. Everything is closed. Nobody can fly. Nobody's driving from city to city. Nobody's seeing each other. You can't go to the grocery store without standing in a line. And the reply to me was, we got 400 people in the backyard swimming in the pool right now at this hotel. We're cranking. Everything's normal. It's business as usual. In fact, it's better than it's ever been, because Florida hadn't closed their doors yet.
Right.
And it hadn't hit companies nationwide. It hit companies strategically based on what state you lived in. And some states closed down a little earlier, and some states stayed open a little longer. So there was a bit of a struggle at first, and the stress started to build up, because the way these contracts are made was I was on the hook for a whole lot of hotel rooms and a whole lot of food and beverage and a whole lot of AV that I was going to have to come out of pocket to pay for. At the same time, we were going to return the money for people who had spent money on sponsorships and badges, because they aren't able to attend and partake, and it's not right in a long-term situation to hold on to their money. So it was like, we're going to give up money and spend money. Well, as a small business owner, that's the recipe for a disaster, just an absolute disaster, right? So fortunately, after many phone calls, the hotel we were working with saw what was actually happening, as audiences that were traveling to their area weren't able to travel there any longer. And so we were able to work with them in a great way, and we still have a phenomenal relationship with them. Everyone kind of caught on to this COVID thing at a different pace. And as of today, we have a wonderful working relationship with them. But we were able to suspend and push that forward by a year, which was really helpful. And then, long story short, we actually had to push it forward by 2 years, because this COVID thing went for 2021, right? Mm-hmm. It wasn't much longer than a few weeks. It was much longer than, remember it was shutter in place for 6 weeks? Well, shutter in place for 6 weeks became 2 years. Mm-hmm. So in that time frame, we were very, very fortunate. My partner and I and our team, a really, really, really amazing team with great people, talented, all committed to the success of the organization. And we have phenomenal members, and members that became council members, and council members who became friends and family of the association. And we started doing a lot of Zoom calls and meeting with all of our association members and talking about, well, none of us are getting together. We all want to get together. We're not going to do this in person. So what can we do to make this work? And collectively, with the power of mindset of the team, and I say the team internally at the organization, but externally throughout the entire membership, everybody raised their hand. Everybody wanted to be involved. Everybody wanted to be engaged. Everybody wanted to participate. And everybody had feedback and ideas. And we were able to take all the best of the ideas and turn them into opportunities that generated revenue and also kept the group together. And I think that was the key part. Everybody wanted to stay together. And we had to do everything digitally. We had to do it virtually. We had to do it in different and new ways. And in that process, we came up with some cool things. And one of the cool things that we came up with, Chris, you're a huge part of, it's called the PDMI Take 20. And the PDMI Take 20 is a bi-weekly webinar, and it brings together industry leaders to talk about trending topics. And we do it all in 20 minutes or less. And we always say 20 minutes or less, so really it takes about 30 minutes. And since COVID started, we've been doing this religiously. Chris, you know this deeply because you're the world's greatest moderator. You moderate this session. We've done 90 sessions in a row together, which is absolutely fantastic. And we've watched the audience grow and become stronger and more deeply involved. We've watched the opportunities of being able to touch base on topics we never thought about even making possible. And when we were going through the COVID period, I remember talking to my partner Tom, and we were saying, well, as soon as we're back to normal, I don't think we'll be doing a lot of webinars. Well, that's totally wrong, right? We're doing more webinars now than we've ever done, and people love it. And we love doing it because it gives us a touch point that we never had, or an opportunity to get in front of people on a weekly or even sometimes monthly basis. So I know I rambled a little bit here, but I hope that kind of answers some of your questions.
Well, it does. And I think that sense of longing to get connected and reconnect. And you mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation that you're an extrovert. You thrive on the energy of other people, right? And that engaging with other people not only gives you a lift of life, but it gives you the energy to give more to other people, right? And so oftentimes, right, there's a feedback loop.
Oh yeah, no, totally, absolutely, 110%, right? There is a give and take when it comes to wanting to be around people. You get more energy, you bring more energy to the room. Everyone's breathing a little bit more oxygen around you, and you are as well, and it's a fun experience. But when I think about the COVID years, I think about 2020 and 2021. There was that business side for me that there was a lot of uncertainty, but at the same time, I felt like if we are active participants, we will find a way to get through this process, right? And if we don't settle, we'll find a way to get through this process. And, we grinded and we put our heads down and we worked really hard. And I had friends that worked for corporations that were working from home, and they were like, well, it's like summer break. I'm not working. What did you do today? Well, I'm not working. It's COVID, man. I'm not working. I'm hanging out. We're going down to the beach today. What's Wednesday at 12? How can you be going to the beach? Don't you have a job? Dude, I don't really work. It's COVID. And it's like, that wasn't us. We grinded 50, 60 hours a week during COVID to just hold the business together and get from point A to point B. And I'm so glad we did. One, I love working, but two, I'm just so thankful that we were supported by our membership, we were supported by our friends, we were supported by the industry, and we were able to give back to them. On a personal note.
I think though, before you get into the personal note, I just wanted to touch on that because COVID affected people so differently. There are folks who hold up. I know people who retreated and couldn't quite get out of the retreat. I think for some introverts, COVID was a blessing because they could negotiate people on their own terms with email, with text, with Zoom calls, and they didn't need to have that constant presence and interactivity in an office. I think for you, again, this actually gets to the pattern of your life of responding. You responded with energy, and you responded not with a downtrodden woe is me approach. You responded with, what can I do to make this situation the best situation possible? And more importantly, how can I stay connected to the network of people that I love? And most importantly, how can I continue to give to the network and the people that I love? And I think that made all the difference.
I would totally agree with you. That's where my energy came from. If I had to sit in a room by myself and not communicate with people, I would wither away and literally die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know.
But so from a professional standpoint, COVID was really challenging, but not just for me, for the whole world, for my neighbors, my friends, my community. It was hard for everybody, right? And I think you said it best, which was it was different for everyone. And although some people did thrive a little bit in that environment, I think most people never want to do it again. I know I never want to go through that again. But from a personal level, we had a family tragedy during COVID too. So that was really heartbreaking. I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that I'm one of 7 children. And my oldest brother, Bob, early on when COVID started, he was really concerned about catching the virus. And I remember telling him on multiple occasions on the phone, like, look, if you have things you have to do, like you have a doctor's appointment to see for your eyes, or you have to go to, some X, Y, and Z reasons you have to leave the house, you're going to be fine, man. Look, you just do what you have to do. And it's ultimately terrible advice that I gave him, because he ended up contracting the virus in June, late June of 2020, when these are back in the days when you got the virus, it wasn't like Omicron, which vaccinated the whole country because everybody got a light version and they were sick for 4 days and then they were better. And it was like, okay, I've done that, right? This was back when you got COVID and it was the death sentence. You know, you were ending up in a hospital, people couldn't breathe, that whole situation. And contingent upon what your underlying conditions were, it affected each person differently. But the country, the doctors, the scientists, we just didn't know enough about the virus. Like, it was like throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what stuck when it came to trying to treat it, right? And so in June, when he got it, for the first week, he was kind of like, you know, I'm sick, but I'm not so sick, and this is not so bad. Week 2, he got really, really sick. Like, it just got worse and worse, where he was having a hard time breathing. He was having, you know, a bad fevers and the whole deal. Week 3, he went to the hospital because he had to get in. Back then, you had to go in a car and get lined up outside the hospital and see if there was beds for you. The first hospital he went to didn't have any room for him. They just said, we're full. We can't take you in, but we're going to give you an O2 meter and a couple of other items to take home and watch yourself. And if your oxygen levels drop below, and I don't know the marker, but if it dropped below a certain marker, come back to the hospital. So he went back to the hospital 2 days later, but he went to a different hospital to get admitted. And within 12 hours of being at the hospital, they had induced him into a coma, intubated him with a breathing tube, of which that was the spiral downward to a bad place, because anyone who got intubated back then really didn't make it. I mean, the percentages of people that got intubated were not surviving. And they had done a bunch of blood work on him, and in the 12 hours that he was there before he was intubated, because he was having such hard time breathing, and he found out that he was type 2 diabetic. And he didn't know he was type 2 diabetic, so he wasn't treating himself, that goes back to when I mentioned earlier, which is, you know, you've got to be proactive, not reactive on things like your health, right? I experienced that with my liver condition, where I was being reactive because I hadn't taken the time to be proactive in terms of making myself sure that I'm totally healthy. Well, he was living his life, but it turns out that if you have type 2 diabetes, that was a surefire way for people who got COVID in 20 to have a worse reaction, because that underlying condition was one of the conditions that made it more difficult for people to recover from the virus. Now, if he would have been seen by a doctor, done a checkup, and was on medication for his type 2 diabetes, he would have been in a much better place. When he got the COVID virus, he would have been in a much better place, much safer, much better chance of recovering. But it was exasperated because of that situation. And over the next 12 days, he lived on a breathing tube, and nobody in the family could visit him. His wife, his kids, no family members, nobody could go to the hospital to check on him. So you were lucky to have one person, which was his son or his wife, to get a daily report from a hospital letting us know what his condition is. And that's all you get. He was just in a room. We don't know how many people were in the room. We don't know how often he was checked. We don't know how often people were taking care of him. But that's back when they were doing a lot of proning. I don't know if you remember what proning is, but they would position people on their chest or their sides and move them for breathing purposes with the tubes down their throats, for being intubated for the COVID purposes of not getting oxygen, right? Because the virus is stopping people from deep lung breathing. And a couple of times we had heard from different nurses, and they know it happened twice, where while proning, his oxygen tube was kind of cut off, which reduced his ability to breathe even more. But they were like, oh, but don't worry, we caught it right away and fixed it. We don't know. Did he go 6 hours without oxygen flowing at the proper level? We'll never know. The major treatment at the time was remdesivir. It would shove remdesivir down everybody's throats without knowing what the side effects would be. And ultimately, after going to the hospice for 12 days, his body started to shut down. His organs started to shut down. His body started to bleed out of different orifices, and he died. He passed away. And I think the heartbreaking part for all of our family was nobody could be there for him. You couldn't be his advocate. which I feel so strongly about, having advocates and being an advocate for yourself. Nobody was there to say, hey, his breathing tube is pinched off and he needs help right now. No one was there to hold his hand and say, you're going to be all right. So that was the heartbreaking part for everyone. And this didn't happen to just our family. This happened to thousands of families across the country.
Millions.
Yeah.
And, I can't, first, I'm so sorry for your loss and your family's loss. And, I don't know how collectively you guys got through that. I have to imagine you had to get through it together as family.
It's interesting. None of us lived near one another. And so there was not like, come over to my house and we'll get together, because people weren't flying. Driving a long distance during COVID wasn't, it wasn't seen as a good thing. So, we postponed the funeral until September, because if you remember, COVID stopped and started a couple of times.
Right. No, that's right. I'd forgotten that for those who passed, you couldn't even have funeral gatherings. How did you stay connected with your family, and how did you stay connected with your mom and your dad?
Well, my mom passed 13 years ago from a terrific battle with colon cancer. So, and I know this was tough on my dad, because, it's a natural order of life is that parents die before children. And even though my brother was in his 50s, it's never easy for a parent to lose a child first. So, we just made phone calls, checked in on each other, text messages. And funny enough, you find yourself laughing sometimes more in these times. I think laughter brings cure. It's one of the best medicines you could ever imagine.
What would you laugh about? Stories of your past? Goofy moments?
We'd make fun of each other, goofy moments, remember whens, that kind of stuff. And, remember we were in the hospital, Mom was not doing well, and Tom said and did this, X, Y, and Z, and everybody would laugh. And, it's kind of, and Tom's one of my brothers. I think you live on times that you enjoy, memories. And you also just know that, look, everything's in a plan, and that, if you're a religious person or believe in a spiritual being, I'm Christian, it's God's plan. And it was his time. It was his time. And that was his path. And it just is what it is. And it's not for me to understand. It's just for me to push through.
Push through, right. It's interesting. There are too many mysteries for us to comprehend. And the idea of the art of moving forward, and like I said, this innate sense of resiliency, because you've built that over time. Because even through all that trauma and that sadness, John, you are still one of the most optimistic, genuinely cheerful, enthusiastic, effervescent, and energy-creating people I've ever known in my life.
Well, when I hear you say that, it warms my heart, but it also, I look at that and go, I don't know who you're talking about. I'm just me. I'm not all those things. I'm just me, man.
You are those things. And I wonder, yes, I think some of it's innate, but I think it's also something that you've cultivated over time. I think you've cultivated resilience and cultivated optimism as a mechanism for moving forward.
Yeah, well, I think you're probably right. It's a combination of learned behavior and what you're born with, right? Some people are not born fighters. Some people are born lovers. And that's okay too, right? But you have to be able to use what you have, coupled with what you learn, to make the most of where you're going.
I love that. Oh, I'm going to rephrase that, or try to repeat that exactly as you said. You do what you've got and what you've learned to be the best that you can be.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So I promised you that I would talk about a 10-year time period and leave the rest of my book for a future day, because only the podcast can only be so long, and I'm sure people are like, all right, let's cut this off, guys. So I'll round us out with, you would imagine that hopefully the COVID years would end it, but 2022, another hurdle came up in my life. And in 2022, I had been living in this perfect little beach house down in Laguna Beach, California. And it had 160, not a full 180, but more like 160 degree, 170 degree view of the ocean. It was like right off of PCH Highway. It was super underpriced for market level. The guy that had owned the properties, there was 3 houses, like a triplex on property. I had a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage, 1-car garage, 2 parking spaces. It was perfect, right? It was just perfect. And it was way under market rent. The guy that had owned it had acquired a bunch of family properties. He was a super nice guy. And he was never married, no children. When he passed away, his 2 sisters acquired the property. And they're nice people. They're really good people. But they made the decision to sell the building. And when the building sold, the new owner came by and first played it off as like they're just property management and they're just checking things out and everything is cool. And then I found out that everything's not cool. The building's gonna be torn down and then rebuilt. And I'm welcome to stay in the unit if I wanted to and continue the wonderful lifestyle that I had and all the neighbors that I enjoyed and the activities that I partake in. But I'd need about a year hiatus from doing that. And when I came back, the cost of living there was going to quadruple.
No.
And so it's like, man, can't catch a break here, right? But at the same time, I recognized that I had this wonderful experience and a fabulous place to live for so long. And like I said, it was under market value, so I was able to save some money along the way. And that really kind of opened the door to allow me to say, I'm going to go hunting. And I bought a house in the city over a way, and was able to renovate that house. And my girlfriend and I moved in together, and it's been fabulous. So this losing my place to live and a place that I love being actually created a better opportunity for me. I went from a renter to an owner. I went from an owner to a happy owner because it's now tailored the way I want it. I'm living with the person I want to live with. What could I ask for? So, these tragic moments always seem to open up a door to make yourself stronger, better, more resistant, more resilient, and gives you, I guess the way I would say it is, every time something happens, and this goes back to your question about reacting or responding, you can react, you can throw a fit, you can say, woe is me, this sucks, I'm going to give up, or you can take a deep breath and stop and respond and say, okay, this isn't cool, but I'm going to do this X, Y, and Z to move forward. And when I do, I'm going to be so much better for it.
And I think what's interesting is that when you do move forward, it's just what you said. You're better for it. You're better than you were before. And I know it's a cliche that what doesn't kill you make you stronger, but that's why they call them cliches, right? The idea of, improving the next chapter, even though the previous chapter was a challenge, but you're better than the chapter even before. I do think that comes, though, with someone with a heart full of love, and I do think that comes from a place of gratitude, and I do think that some of it's innate, but it's also a choice you can make.
It is, and I'll say this in closing on this conversation that we're having. I've really enjoyed talking with you today, Chris. I'll say that there's always going to be another chapter, and that chapter is going to be filled with heartache, with injury, whether it's emotional or physical, and you're always going to have an opportunity to respond or react to it. And how you choose to respond or react will set you up for the next chapter. What I've learned in this process, I would say 5 things, and I mentioned some of these earlier, but you got to be an active participant in life. And I have this saying, and I say, if you just want to be a participant in life, you can be a C student. I mean, think back to high school. If you just showed up and sat in the classroom, you're getting a C. You don't have to do anything, you're getting a C. But if you're an active participant, now that's where you do A work, right? You learn for yourself, and you get to prove yourself a little bit, and you get to walk away with some form of reward. In the case of school, it would be maybe walking away with the A. But in life, that A can translate to a lot of other things. I'm a huge proponent of not squandering your time. We don't know how many opportunities you're going to have to wake up in the morning and have another wonderful day. This might be your last day, so don't squander it. It's like live every moment to the fullest and enjoy what you have and who you're with and how you do things, and just don't squander your time. You got to have advocates, and you need to be your own best advocate. Don't settle. Always push for more. Good enough isn't always good enough. And then I'll leave on the golden rule, which is you got to treat people the way you want to be treated. And not everyone's going to treat you wonderful. That's okay. Walk away from them. But your life's so much easier when you treat people the way you want to be treated.
Amen to that. Amen to all of that. Words of wisdom. In one of the episodes, I talk about dropping pearls and picking them up. You just dropped a bunch of pearls, Johnny. And I hope that the folks listening to this can pick up some of those pearls and use it in this life. My man, you're amazing. And I love you.
Love you too, bro. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share and talk. I felt like just going through this process, I've grown a little bit. So thank you.
You know what? That's the point. So we can all grow together. All right, my man. Have a great day. Wow. What a great story. What a great guy. John Yarrington. Pushing forward. It's interesting. He does have this gift of resiliency, and he does have a way of moving forward, but I also think he's got a way of looking at his life. He even said, I think of my life as chapters. Each year is a chapter in my life. I like that thinking, because the chapters that happen in the past, they're done, and you can move on from those and learn from them, and there are chapters yet to be written. I know some guys who get whittled down by adversity or moments of trauma. He pushed forward. He moves ahead. And he does it with a spirit of love that he can get from other people and that he can give to other people. And he drops some wonderful pearls, right? What did we learn? We learned that be your own advocate. We learned that you can tap into a network who wants to help you. We learned that all the adversity you go through can help you build resiliency for the challenges ahead. That's why we have this podcast, so we can learn from one another. I hope that you enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you tell your friends about it. Visit menfolkjourneys.com and drop us a line. Let me know if you want to have a conversation, because I know that you have a great story to tell. And I guarantee you, if we keep telling our stories, maybe we'll get a better understanding of ourselves and maybe get a better understanding of each other too, so that we can all make all of us a little bit better together. Again, visit menfolkjourneys.com, tell your friends about it, and let me know. I'd love to have the conversation with you, because I know that you have a great story to tell. Word bid Falared.